In 2021, I was driving alone across an Arizona stretch of Highway 66. I visited a friend, and it was well past midnight. There wasn't another car in sight. No headlights in the rear view, no taillights ahead. Just the hum of my engine and an oppressive, heavy silence pressing against the windows. Everyone knows Route 66 for its sunny history. The diners, the neon, the tourists. But after dark, that history fades. It simply becomes a desolate void. Out there, in the dark vacuum of the desert, you quickly realize how completely cut off from help you are. The absolute isolation chips away at your defenses until you start to second-guess the shadows in your own headlights. I was 100 miles from anywhere when my brights caught something on the shoulder. Just a lone figure, standing perfectly still. As I closed the distance, the details snapped into focus. It was a man in a dark hoodie, his pale face reflecting the harsh headlight glare. But his face made my blood run cold. He was wearing a wide, unnatural smile, a frozen grin that never moved, his eyes staring straight ahead, unblinking. He slowly raised his hand, asking for a ride. Empathy vanished. Every primal survival instinct I had screamed at me to keep driving, so I locked the doors, gripped the wheel, and plunged back into the dark. I watched him disappear into the red glow of my taillights. I let out a shaky breath, telling myself it was just some stranded weirdo. I had put miles between us. I was safe. Then I glanced up into my rearview mirror. He was sitting right there, in my back seat. My hands locked onto the steering wheel. I couldn't breathe. I was completely paralyzed, trapped in a metal box doing 70 miles an hour with an impossible entity. The figure slowly leaned forward, closing the distance until I could feel the cold radiating off him. Right beside my ear, he whispered, "You shouldn't have stopped here." The car was no longer a sanctuary. The locks and the steel frame meant nothing while I was moving at high speed. I couldn't jump out, and I couldn't bring myself to pull over. Before I could even react, the dashboard radio snapped on. Thick, aggressive static flooded the cabin, drowning out the engine. Voices began breaking through the white noise. It was a news broadcast, reading off names and descriptions of missing persons, people who had vanished on this exact stretch of highway decades ago. I looked back to the dark road ahead, and suddenly, another figure was standing completely still, dead center in my lane. I slammed on the brakes and cranked the wheel. The tires shrieked as I lost complete control of the car, and a split second later, I violently impacted the metal guardrail. The haunting in the mirror had forced a real-world catastrophe. My car was totaled, the engine was dead, and I was pinned against the steering wheel by the wreckage. When I opened my eyes, the horn was blaring.
The windshield was fractured, and a freezing, thick fog was pouring in through the broken glass. Pure adrenaline flooded my system. I unclipped my seatbelt and frantically twisted around, throwing my hands up to brace for an attack from the passenger. But there was nothing. The back seat was completely empty. I was alone. Sitting in the wreckage, my mind spiraled, trying to process whether I had just suffered a severe hallucination or if the entity had simply vanished into the dark. Minutes later, the blinding red and blue lights of a state trooper's cruiser pierced through the desert fog, bringing a sudden wave of reality. I was shaking, wrapped in a blanket, as I recounted every detail to the officer. The dark hoodie, the pale skin, the unnatural, unblinking smile in my rearview mirror. He stopped writing. The color drained from his face as he looked at me, visibly terrified. He lowered his notepad and quietly said, "That's impossible." The man I just described had died in a head-on collision on this same strut of asphalt 30 years ago. His grin was the last thing anyone ever saw on this road.